Evan Holt had traveled across many planets as a simple human soldier, but nothing in his life had prepared him for the Frost Empire, a kingdom of ice that stretched beyond the horizon. Every building shone like crystal, every floor felt colder than winter storms, and every alien who lived here carried an expression that made him feel small. Evan had been warned before entering the royal hall that the Frost Royals were famous for their cold hearts, their sharp discipline, and their strict laws. One mistake could cost a life, and humans were always watched closely. He walked through the massive doors of the ceremonial chamber, trying to look calm, but his breath shook each time the icy air hit his lungs. Hundreds of Frost nobles stood quietly on each side, their pale blue skin glowing under the white flames of the floating torches. In the center of the hall, on a raised platform, stood the one person everyone feared and respected the most, Princess Arela, known across the galaxy as the Cold Princess. She wore armor that looked carved from frozen stars, her eyes colder than space, and her posture strong enough to silence anyone who dared to speak. Evan had heard rumors about her. Some said she had no emotions at all. Some said she could freeze an entire battlefield with one breath. Others claimed she had never smiled in her life. He believed all those stories because one look at her made him feel like he had stepped into a storm that could swallow him whole. Still, he had a job. He had to deliver a diplomatic message from the human colonies. He practiced his words in his head, repeating them again and again, hoping he would not embarrass himself. As he stepped forward, his boots touched a thin layer of frost covering the polished floor. For a moment, everything seemed normal, but then his foot slid just a little, just enough to throw him off balance. Before he could stop himself, he stumbled forward. His hand reached out instinctively, trying to steady his fall. And in that terrible moment, his fingers brushed against something soft and cold. The side of Princess Arela's waist. The entire room froze in shock. As if time itself had stopped breathing. A human touching a Frost Royal was a crime punishable by immediate execution. Every guard in the hall reacted at once. Their weapons sparked with icy energy as they aimed directly at Evan's chest. Several nobles gasped. Some whispered in their alien language, and others stepped back as though they expected Arela to unleash her power at any second. Evan's heart pounded so loudly he felt it echo inside his skull. He dropped to his knees without thinking, hands up, eyes wide, knowing that his life was now hanging by a frozen thread. Princess Arela did not move at first. She just stared at him, her expression unreadable, her icy breath forming a thin mist in the air. Evan waited for the blast of cold fire, the wave of frozen energy, the end. But instead, something strange happened. Arela stepped closer, her boots made no sound on the floor. And for a moment, her shadow fell over him like a falling curtain of ice. Evan squeezed his eyes shut, expecting pain, but none came, only a whisper touched his ear. Soft but deadly clear. "Prepare yourself, human. Tonight, you will come to my private quarters." Evan opened his eyes, confused. His brain refused to understand what he had heard. The guards lowered their weapons slowly, shocked by the princess's decision. Whispers filled the hall again, louder than before. Some nobles looked furious, others terrified. A Frost Royal never spared someone who broke the law, and certainly never summoned them to their private chambers. Something was wrong. Something was very, very strange. Two guards approached Evan and lifted him to his feet. Their grips were cold enough to make him flinch, but they did not harm him. Instead, they escorted him out of the hall, step by step. As every pair of glowing alien eyes watched him leave, Evan felt sweat on his back despite the freezing temperature. His legs shook with each step. His mind kept replaying the same words again and again. What did she mean, prepare yourself? Why would she call him to her private quarters? What would happen to him there? Once outside the hall, the doors shut behind him with a sound like a glacier cracking. He stood in the icy hallway, breathing hard, trying to calm himself. But he could still feel where his hand had touched her armor. He could still hear her cold whisper. And he could still feel the weight of a destiny he did not understand settling across his shoulders like heavy snow. Evan Holt had made a mistake. A simple, clumsy human mistake, but that single moment had changed everything, and now he had no choice but to face whatever waited for him in the cold princess's private chambers. Evan Holt walked through the endless ice tunnels with two Frost guards holding his arms tightly. Their touch was like metal pulled from deep winter, and every second in their grip reminded him that he was not a guest but a prisoner. The air around him felt colder than before, or maybe it was just fear sinking deeper into his bones. Either way, each step toward the cold princess's private wing made his heart beat like a warning drum inside his chest. The tunnels glowed with pale blue light, crystals embedded in the walls humming softly as if whispering secrets from centuries ago. Evan had never seen architecture like this. The Frost Empire didn't build with stone or metal. They shaped living ice that responded to their power. The walls shifted slightly as they passed, as though the palace itself was alive and watching them. Every time the ice moved, Evan felt a chill crawl up his spine. He wondered if the palace was reacting to him. A human who did not belong here at all. The guards did not speak, but Evan heard them muttering in their alien language under their breath. A few words he caught were unsettling: chosen, bond, danger. He didn't understand what they meant, but the tone made his stomach twist. If they feared something, that something had to be worse than he imagined. When they finally reached a towering set of doors shaped like frozen wings, Evan felt his legs weaken. This was it, Princess Arila's private chambers, a place no outsider had ever entered. The guards stopped, releasing him but not stepping back. One of them touched the ice door, and the wings parted silently, opening into a wide chamber filled with white firelight and swirling cold mist. Inside, Princess Arila stood with her back turned to him, staring at a wall of frost that acted like a mirror. Her reflection was sharp and still, but her real body shifted slightly as she sensed his arrival. Evan hesitated, unsure if he should walk in, bow, kneel, or run for his life. But the guards pushed him forward gently, forcing him into the room before the doors closed behind him like a sealed tomb. Arila finally turned. Her gaze pierced straight through him, not angry, not cruel, but studying him as if trying to read a language only she could understand. She walked closer, her footsteps silent on the frozen floor. Evan swallowed hard, trying to keep his fear from showing. But his breath fogged the air quickly, betraying him. "You are wondering why you are still alive," she said, her voice cold but steady. Evan nodded slowly, unable to form words. Arila raised a hand, and the temperature around him spiked dangerously low. Ice crystals formed on his sleeves. But then, suddenly, the cold stopped. She lowered her hand and continued. "When you touched me, something ancient awakened inside me," she said. "Something that should not have awakened with a human." Evan blinked, confused. "I didn't mean to touch you, it was an accident," he said nervously. "I know," she replied, "and yet the bond activated anyway." That word again, bond. It hung in the air like a prophecy he didn't understand. Arila moved past him, circling slowly, her eyes never leaving him. It felt like she was searching for something in his expression, something he did not know he had. "In Frost royal bloodlines," she explained, "a psychic bond forms only once in a lifetime and only with one being in the universe." Evan felt his heart freeze. He shook his head. "But I'm just a soldier, a normal human. There's nothing special about me." Arila paused. "And yet you triggered the bond." The room trembled slightly. As if reacting to her words, Evan stepped back instinctively, but she lifted a hand, and the ice held steady. "What does the bond mean?" he whispered. Arila's expression softened, only slightly, but enough to shock him. He had never seen a Frost royal show even this much emotion. "It means," she said quietly, "that your fate is now tied to mine." Evan felt breathless. "Tied how?" "It means the council will try to kill you," she answered calmly, as if discussing the weather, "and possibly me as well." Evan's chest tightened. The council, the group of strict elders who ruled the Frost Empire, were known for their merciless decisions. If they saw him as a threat, he didn't stand a chance. Arila stepped closer, her cold aura wrapped around him like a freezing wind. But beneath the cold there was something new, something warm, something unsure, something human. "When you touched me," she continued, "you awakened emotions I have never felt. Our people believe emotions make a leader weak." Evan stared at her. "You felt something." For the first time, Arila looked away, embarrassed, which shocked him far more than her cold stare ever did. The silence was broken by a loud boom from somewhere far inside the palace. The ice walls vibrated, sending ripples of light across the chamber. Arila's eyes sharpened instantly. "They have sensed the bond," she said. "The council is coming." Evan stepped back, panic rising. "What do they want?" "To eliminate the threat," she replied, "meaning you." Another boom echoed through the halls. Louder this time, the guards outside were shouting in the Frost language, weapons powering up. The threat was real. Arila faced Evan fully now, her voice low and urgent. "If you leave this room without me, you will die." Evan felt the weight of her words. His life was no longer his own. She extended her hand, something no Frost royal had ever done to a human. Her eyes glowed faintly, not with cold, but with something almost like fear. "Do you trust me enough to survive this night?" she asked. Outside, the ice cracked. Footsteps approached, weapons hummed, death waited. And Evan realized he had no choice but to take her hand. The moment Evan placed his trembling hand into Princess Arila's cold palm, the chamber lights flickered as if the palace itself reacted to their connection. A strange pulse moved through the floor, like a frozen heartbeat waking up after centuries. Evan felt a shock run through his skin, but it wasn't painful. It felt like energy recognizing him, pulling him towards something ancient and forgotten. Arila's grip tightened, firm and protective, something no frost royal had ever shown to a human. Outside the chamber, the echoes of armored footsteps grew louder. The council's hunters were coming, warriors trained from childhood to kill anything that threatened the Frost Empire. Their armor made a sharp cracking sound with each step, like glaciers breaking apart in slow motion. Evan's heart raced. If they entered this room, he knew he wouldn't live long enough to understand what was happening to him. Arila turned toward a wall of solid ice, raising her free hand. A bright blue sigil glowed beneath her fingertips, and the ice split open, revealing a hidden passage that spiraled down into darker depths of the palace. Evan had no time to think. Arila pulled him forward, and together they slipped inside the secret corridor. The wall reformed silently behind them, leaving no trace of their escape. The tunnel they entered was narrow and filled with swirling cold mist, blue crystals lining the walls like stars trapped in frozen glass. Evan shivered as the temperature dropped even lower. But Arila seemed unaffected instead. She walked ahead with purpose, her long white cape trailing behind her like a stream of frost. Evan finally found his voice. "Where are we going?" he asked, breath trembling in the freezing air. "To a place where the council's eyes cannot follow us," she replied calmly. "To the chamber of the prophecy." Evan stumbled slightly. "Prophecy? What prophecy?" Arila slowed her pace and looked at him over her shoulder. Her eyes were still cold, yet within them burned the faintest spark of something unfamiliar, something almost human. "There is an ancient belief," she said, "that a frost royal will one day bond with an outsider made of warm blood. Together, they will decide the fate of our empire." Evan froze in place. "You think that's me?" "I do not think," she replied softly. "The bond confirms it." Before Evan could respond, the tunnel widened into a circular chamber glowing with pale light. Enormous walls of ice curved upward into a dome filled with floating symbols that pulsed gently. At the center stood a large crystal obelisk, sharp and glowing with shifting colors. It hummed like a living thing, ancient and waiting. Arila stepped closer to the obelisk, releasing Evan's hand. He felt the sudden absence of her touch like a cold wind passing through his chest. "This crystal holds our history," she explained, "our truths and our lies." Evan watched as she pressed her palm against the obelisk. A swirl of light spread across its surface, shifting into an image. A frost princess standing beside a figure that looked unmistakably human. The two were surrounded by light, while shadows resembling the council tried to tear them apart. Evan stared in disbelief. "That's us." Arila nodded. "The bond is real, and the council fears it. They believe it will lead to the fall of their power." Evan stepped closer, trying to understand. "But why me? I'm not special, I'm not powerful, I'm not even from here." Arila turned toward him fully, her face no longer expressionless, no longer cold. There was something fragile in her eyes, something she had probably never shown another living being. "When you touched me," she said slowly, "I felt emotion for the first time in my life." Evan blinked, stunned. He had assumed frost royals were simply born without emotion, but hearing that she experienced something new because of him felt unreal. Arila continued, "Our people believe emotions are weakness, so I hid them, buried them, denied them." She placed a hand over her heart. "But your touch awakened something I cannot control." Before Evan could answer, the entire chamber shook violently. Cracks spread along the walls, sending shards of ice raining down. In the distance, deep, thundering footsteps approached. The hunters had found the secret entrance. Arila's expression hardened. Her power flared, the air around her glowing with a dangerous blue aura. "They will kill us both," she said, "unless we fight." Evan wasn't a warrior trained for alien battles, but he nodded anyway, fear and determination mixing inside him. "What do I do?" he asked. Arila extended her hand again. "Stay behind me and do not let go." The chamber doors exploded inward, and a group of frost hunters marched inside, their armor shining like icy blades. Their leader raised a halberd crackling with blue lightning, His voice boomed across the chamber. "Princess Arela," he said, "stand aside and surrender the human." Evan felt Arela grip his hand tightly. Her voice was steady, but a storm of power gathered around her like a rising blizzard. "I will not," she said. "He is under my protection." The hunters advanced, their weapons humming with lethal energy. Evan braced himself, expecting her to push him aside or order him to run. But instead, she stepped in front of him, spreading her arms like a shield. Blue light erupted from her body, swirling around her like a living storm. The temperature in the chamber dropped so sharply that Evan's breath froze midair. The hunters looked shaken, some stepping back. "Princess, your energy is unstable," the leader warned. Arela's voice echoed with ancient power. "Now you will see what I truly am." The ice beneath their feet cracked, shards floating upward as if gravity no longer applied. Arela's aura expanded, transforming her into a figure of pure frost energy, majestic and terrifying. Evan watched in awe, realizing he had never truly seen her strength until this moment. She wasn't just the cold princess. She was a storm waiting its whole life to break free. The chamber shook as Princess Arela released her full power, a storm of blue energy swirling around her like a blizzard brought to life. Evan stood behind her, barely able to stay on his feet as the air turned sharp and heavy. Frost crystals floated in the air like glowing shards, drifting with her heartbeat. Her aura was so bright it cast long shadows across the cracked ice floor. For the first time, Evan saw the truth. This was not a princess meant only to rule. She was a force of nature. A living blade of winter. The frost hunters stumbled back, shielding their faces from the storm. Their armor cracked under the pressure, and the swirling cold pushed them across the chamber. The leader gritted his teeth, trying to resist, but even he trembled under the weight of her unleashed energy. "Princess Arela," he shouted, "your power is forbidden. The council will punish you for this." Arela raised her hand, and the blizzard spun faster. "If the council wants to destroy my destiny," she said coldly, "then let them come." Her voice echoed through the chamber, turning the air into a vibrating wave of cold force. The hunters tried to advance again, but Arela struck first. Her aura surged forward like a tidal wave, lifting the hunters off their feet and slamming them against the ice walls. Evan gasped at the sight. He had never seen such raw energy, not from any alien species, not from any weapon. But then the light flickered, Arela's aura dimmed, and she staggered, placing a hand on her chest. Evan saw her knees weaken as cracks of frost spread across her armor. "Arela," he yelled, rushing forward. She held up a trembling hand to stop him. "Don't come closer," she whispered. "This power, it is tearing me apart." The hunters rose again, slowly, bruised but alive. Their leader wiped frost from his visor and glared at her. "Your bond with the human is corrupting you," he said. "It destroys your balance, it makes you weak." Arela's eyes flashed with anger. "Weak? I have never been stronger." But Evan saw the truth. Her breath shook, her hands trembled, and the glow around her flickered like a dying flame. Every burst of power drained her more. The bond that awakened her emotion also destabilized her ancient frost energy. The hunters charged again, and Arela tried to summon another wave of power. But her knees buckled. Evan didn't think, didn't hesitate. He ran forward, grabbing her before she collapsed completely. His warm hands wrapped around her cold body, and she gasped softly as if his touch brought her back from the edge of breaking. The hunters stopped, stunned for the first time in history. A frost princess leaned against a human for support. Evan held her firmly. "You don't have to fight alone," he said, voice trembling but sincere. Arela's eyes softened. "I never wanted to fight alone," she whispered. Before the hunters could strike again, a deep rumbling echoed through the chamber. The ice beneath them cracked, glowing with bright white light. The ancient prophecy crystal reacted to their bond, sending pulses through the entire dome. The hunters stepped back in fear. "The prophecy, it's activating," one muttered. Arela looked weak but determined. "Evan," she whispered, "help me reach the crystal." Evan supported her weight, guiding her toward the glowing obelisk. Each step felt like walking through a collapsing world. The hunters tried to stop them, but bursts of psychic energy erupted from the crystal, pushing the hunters back each time they advanced. It was as if the ancient structure recognized the bond and was protecting them. When they reached the obelisk, Arela placed her trembling hand against it. Evan hesitated, but she looked at him with pleading eyes. "Your hand too," she said quietly, "please." Evan pressed his palm beside hers, the moment his skin touched the cold surface. A shock of energy jolted through both of them. The crystal glowed so brightly that the entire chamber was filled with white flame-like light. Images swirled across the surface, ancient frost royals, ancient battles, ancient tears. Then the prophecy appeared again, the frost princess and the warm-blooded outsider standing together, surrounded by a wave of light that protected their empire. But this time the vision changed. The human was not just standing beside her. He was breathing life back into her, his warmth stabilizing her energy, completing the bond. Erla looked at Evan with wide eyes. The prophecy, it needs you. Evan shook his head. I don't understand any of this. You don't need to, she whispered. Just trust me. The crystal pulsed, and a wave of blue-white light surged into Erla's body. She cried out softly, gripping Evan's hand tightly. Evan held her closer, letting his warmth flow into her. He didn't know if it was enough, but he had nothing else to give. Slowly, the cracks in her armor healed, the flickering glow around her steadied, her breathing grew stronger. The bond stabilized her energy, just as the prophecy showed. Erla straightened, her strength returning, her aura no longer unstable, now controlled and powerful. The hunters looked horrified. They had witnessed the ancient prophecy become real right in front of them. Erla stepped forward, no longer needing support, her eyes shone with fierce power. This human is not a threat, she declared. He is my bond, my balance, and the future of this empire. The hunters dropped to their knees, not out of respect, but out of fear of what she had become. Erla turned back to Evan, her expression no longer cold, no longer distant. She touched his cheek lightly with her frosted fingers. Evan, she said softly, when you touched me, I felt warmth for the first time in my life. Her voice cracked with emotion she could no longer hide. You changed my fate, she whispered, and maybe you changed my heart. Evan didn't know what to say, but she didn't need words. Erla took his hand again, but this time not as a command. As a connection, a bond that neither of them fully understood but both accepted. With the hunters defeated, the prophecy awakened, and the palace trembling with new power, one truth became clear. A simple human soldier had become the key to an empire, and the cold princess, who never felt anything, had found her first warmth in him.